Welcome to Module 5, working with Excel tables, pivot tables, and pivot charts. So all the data that we've seen up until now just sits next to each other. So there's a bunch of cells, and they just hang out sitting next to each other. But for example, let's say we sort one column, all the data is going to be confused. So if my data is first name, phone number, if I sort the first names alphabetically, it will screw up the phone numbers, which is not good. So we need to put them into something. So today, the first thing we're going to talk about is tables, taking the regular data that just sits there on the sheet and putting it into a table that each row or each column is actually connected to each other. It also makes it really easy to add new formulas that apply everywhere, like we're going to see. We're going to talk about structured ranges of data. We're going to talk about freezing rows and columns. So for example, if I have first name at the beginning and then I have 100 more columns, I'm able to scroll over to the side, but always see that first column of seeing where the person's name is. We're going to talk about planning and creating an Excel table. Like we talked about, knowing how the table is going to look at the end is really, really important, especially if you want to print it or display it or keep on adding data to it. We're going to talk about renaming and formatting an Excel table, because that's important to know what table you're working on. Add, editing, and deleting records in an Excel table. And finally, we're going to talk about sorting data. Sorting data, so for example, we could alphabetize all the names, but keep the associated phone numbers in the right spots. In 5.2, we're going to talk about using filters with tables. So in this case, we're taking the data, we're putting it into a table. You'll notice there's all these filter buttons across the top. That's how you know if you're in a table. Probably will also be colored. And then you'll be able to do cool things with it, like not only one level of filtering, but multiple levels of filtering. So for example, alphabetize it, and then everybody who has a certain condition, filter that as well. We're going to look at putting in slicers, and slicers are buttons that you could just click. And that's going to be our first step to making dashboards in Excel, allowing you to explore your data by having a button that you can click, which automatically filters out whatever's in your table. We're going to talk about a total row. Total row is a special row at the bottom of your table that will give you things like count, sum, average, things like that you'll be able to automatically calculate as you manipulate your data. We're going to talk about panes, splitting your worksheet into two panes so you can see things better by separating the sheet either up or down or side to side. We're also going to talk about subtotals, which allow you, based on condition, to add numbers together. And we're going to talk about outline buttons. The bottom line is that all of these things will help you dramatically improve the speed that you can figure things out. Now in 5.3, we're going to move on to a much more powerful feature, and that's called a pivot table. A pivot table allows you to take many different pieces of interrelated data and create a table using special criteria that you identify. We're going to talk about applying pivot table styles, filtering a pivot table, putting slicers that work with a pivot table, using a recommended pivot table, which Excel guesses is what you want, and finally adding pivot charts. Unlike a regular chart like we did before, which is based on data hanging out in the sheet, this is going to be a special chart based on data in the pivot table. So I hope you enjoy this module. There's a lot of really interesting information, and by becoming really good at pivot tables, that's one of the key Excel skills that will really help you in the future.